We wanted to take a moment this morning to honor the memory of David Miranda, who was eulogized yesterday by his husband and all of our good friend, Glenn Greenwald, who wrote on Twitter, "David's life was extraordinary in all ways. His mother died when he was 5, leaving him an orphan in Yacarazin, which is a favela in Rio de Janeiro. But a beautiful and compassionate neighbor took him in, despite 4 children of her own in deep poverty, became his mom, gave him a chance for a life. That gave David the chance to live his full potential in a society that often suffocates it. He was key to the Snowden story, became the first gay man elected to Rio City Council, then federal Congress at 32. He inspired so many with his biography, passion, and force of life." Glenn went on, "Because of how David grew up, there were always many assumptions made by those who didn't know him. Anyone who did will tell you there was nobody with a stronger will or life force. He was proud that he was named by Time to be our next generation's leaders. But by far, David's biggest dream, what gave him the greatest pride and purpose, was being a father. He was the most dedicated and loving parent. He taught me how to be a father. And our truly exceptional boys, with their own difficult start to life, is his greatest legacy." When David arrived at the hospital last August 6th, I was told there was little chance he'd survive the week. I heard the same 3 times since. He refused in classic David style. The last 4 months gave our family the most beautiful moments together. Glenn goes on, "David was singular, the strongest, most passionate, most compassionate man I've known. Nobody had a bad word for him. I can't describe the loss and pain. I'll do my best to honor his legacy, our children, and our NGOs. And I know so many will celebrate him and his impact." Now, David's passing has produced an outpouring of emotion in both Brazil and the United States, including from President Lula da Silva, who was freed from prison primarily as a result of reporting done by Glenn in the Intercept Brazil, which Glenn founded. Lula called David, quote, "a young man with an extraordinary trajectory who left too soon," which is a sentiment that is at once profoundly true yet difficult to fully comprehend. There was no limit to what David's life could have brought, not just to him, but to the people of Brazil, who may have lost a future president with his passing yesterday. What made David so unusual was the combination of his passion, his commitment to his democratic socialist politics, and his kindness, his magnanimity, and his ability to leave even his fiercest opponents with little choice but to like him personally. Most people who have the first of those 2 things, they don't have the third. And when Glenn wrote that, quote, "nobody had a bad word for him," he really meant that. And it's a testament to the love they shared that the 2 of them found each other. Such a perfect compliment. What also separated David was his unusual courage, which he showed throughout his life. Edward Snowden, learning of David's passing, said, "Of everyone who had a hand in the 2013 revelations of global mass surveillance, my dear friend David Miranda was perhaps the most righteous and pure. I will never forget that when the UK broke its own laws to detain David as a terrorist for daring to aid an act of journalism and threatened to throw him in a dungeon for the rest of his life, he never faltered. Instead, he dared them to do it. It was that courage that set him free, that courage that moved the story forward. That will forever serve as the example of a man at his best. I will miss you, David. Stay free." Snowden here is referring to David's 2013 detention by UK authorities, who did indeed threaten to lock him away for life, a threat David stared down in a way few of us might have been able to do. As Snowden said, it was the realization of the authorities that they had no chance to break his will that set him free. Now, 3 years later, in 2016, he ran with Marielle Franco, who also grew up in the city's favelas, for Rio City Council. Both were elected, becoming not just the first gay and lesbian city council members, but genuine radicals and threats to the status quo. In 2018, after leaving an event with Glenn and David, Marielle and her driver were gunned down by an assassin on a motorcycle. The murder was credibly linked to the Bolsonaro family. Glenn and David continued crusading for justice for Marielle, and instead of shrinking from public life in the face of rising death threats, they pushed forward. Later that year, David ran for Congress while Glenn pushed ahead with his investigation into the networks around Bolsonaro. Now, the way elections work in Brazil, candidates run as a slate, and depending on how high up you are on the slate, you win a seat if your party does well enough. David fell 1 slot short of making it into Congress. But then something remarkable happened. The only openly gay member of Congress at the time was facing a wave of credible death threats, and he fled the country, seeking exile rather than what he understood to be certain assassination. That meant that a seat opened up, and it was David's if he wanted it. He never flinched, stepping forward, knowing that every step could be his last. In Congress, he continued to pursue the assassins of Mariel Franco. Now, last summer, he was hospitalized for a GI infection, and it quickly spread to his bloodstream and major organs, producing sepsis, which is often fatal within hours. Yet David battled it for 9 months, making remarkable progress at times, coupled with gut-punching setbacks, which devastatingly included this final one. Now, Glenn doesn't often wax philosophical in public. That's just not his style. But a few times over the last 9 months, he wrote essays about this experience and how it had reshaped the way he thought about life and its meaning. Now, Martin Heidegger's book, Being in Time, which helped to define continental existentialism, took its title from the notion that life, or what he called being, got its meaning from time, or more to the point, the lack of time that we get. We all know that rationally, but it's so easy to forget. In March, Glenn wrote, "Every day since 2005 that David and I woke up and went to sleep and shared and built our lives and careers together and then began raising our children together, we assumed, due to our age and health and hubris, that we would have that for decades to come, as if it were a guarantee, as if the universe had provided us with some enforceable contract that entitled us to assume this belonged to us and could not be taken away. And because we assumed it, we took it for granted. And because we took it for granted, we often ceased valuing it the way it deserved to be valued. What remains most astounding to me is that after all these years, these decades of running and chasing and striving and reaching and grabbing and struggling and pursuing, everything that I actually need for core happiness, fulfillment, and gratitude are things I already have and have had for a long time." He goes on, "And the lack of permanence of those things that provide us the greatest happiness does not make them less valuable. That is what makes them valuable. Their impermanence is the reason to grab them, hold them, appreciate them, and honor them every day that we have them and are thus able to do that." Glenn said that he had found solace and energy in a search for gratitude, and all of us should be grateful to have been privileged enough to share the world with a force as great as David, painfully short as that time was. And all of us here on the Breaking Points channel are sending our love to his family as they grieve his loss. And thinking back over David's life, that moment in 2018, after their good friend was assassinated, and he, instead of backing away from politics, he pushes ahead, and then winds up. Remember when he ran for Congress, he wound up in this remarkable situation, 1 seat short, and then to get the opportunity to go to Congress only because the only other openly gay person decides that it's a death sentence. Yeah. And he said, "I don't care. I'm doing it. Not afraid. You're not going to scare me." And takes his seat in Congress. And as Lula said, his trajectory, knew no limits. Like he was an extraordinarily popular, force in Brazilian politics.
That was exactly the point that stood out to me, the courage, because how often in the United States do we, sometimes acknowledge really difficult stuff, and there are real risks, of course, to journalism and activism and politics in the United States, but to have your friend gunned down and then to have a seat open up because someone is being pushed out of the country by credible death threats for being gay, and then to say, "I'm going into it. I'm taking that seat. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I'm going to do it, even harder and better, and with more strength." That's a testament to incredible authenticity and courage, and is just what a lesson. And I think your remembrance there is absolutely beautiful. It's so jarring when somebody who is such a force, and I didn't know David, but to your point, amazing when somebody passes and there's not a bad word to be said about them. It's just jarring when somebody who does have so much vitality and strength is stopped short. That's one of the strangest things that happens in life.
And today would have been his 39th birthday. And from all of us here, we're wishing as much love and comfort to his family as possible. Thank you all, as always, for joining us, and we'll be back next week with more Counterpoints.
See you then.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Sagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.